Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today with Hasanthika Sirisena. I hope I did that did that well. From West Branch. Thank you so much for coming out today. It's great to see you, great to meet you. And everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions throughout the chat, just go ahead and type them in and I will work them into the conversation. So let's jump right in. West Branch is a magazine from Bucknell University. And Hasanthika, you just took over as editor, is that correct?
Yes, I'm the acting editor. So I've been an associate editor for about 10 years. And so now I'm the sort of the what would be just an editor-in-chief position. That's what I'm doing right now, and so yeah, so we'll go from there.
Okay, great. So how did that, I was just reading the sort of farewell letter from GC Waldrop, and it was a little bit sad. It sounds like he's been there for a long time. And so can you tell us about the transition process? So you were involved in the magazine and then sort of took over as editor-in-chief, or how did that go?
There's actually, so what happened is that GC Waldrop was the editor, I think, for, maybe 10, 12 years. I mean, I think a little over a decade. And then he wanted to move on to other projects.
Mhm.
And so actually, a writer at Bucknell, Joe Scapalato, was the interim last year. And so I think this is a big transition point for the magazine. And I'm not sure exactly how things are going to shake out into the future as far as the editor position is concerned. But yes, so, but I'm really happy to talk about, as far as the transition goes, I think this is a really important moment for literary magazines. And one of the things that's really great is that I know that there's a lot of, I don't know if anybody saw, there was a piece in CNN about how tenuous it is for literary magazines right now in the world. But the really great news is that Bucknell is very, very supportive. Sanderson is very supportive of the magazine. And the magazine is doing really well. So even though there might be some transitions with the editors, I think that's a good thing because it brings a continuing openness of a vision for the magazine. And I think it's probably really good for the magazine's longevity. So yeah.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah. Was the magazine affected by the pandemic at all? Because I know a lot of the magazines started struggling because they had financial issues with their university. Did you experience any of that?
Again, I actually, I am trying to think. There's been nothing that has been brought to my attention that makes me think that that there's any issues around budget or Bucknell University has been very supportive of West Branch, and so I actually think I'm not saying that the pandemic didn't affect us, because I think it certainly affected things like, supply chain issues and things like that. But there's no sort of existential issues for the magazine. I think we're going strong. We're still putting out issues on a regular schedule, and there's been no talk about changing the print magazine. We're still doing a print magazine and a very good online magazine, which publishes things separately from the print magazine. They're in many ways two different, and they're the same magazine, but really two different platforms. And I can't see that changing into the future. So,
that's great. That's great. Congrats. It's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bad saying that, but in the sense of some people, some institutions, and certainly some magazines have disappeared because of this, but that's not the case for West Branch.
That's great. So what is the magazine's affiliation with the university? Do you have, is it part of a class for students? Are there MFA students that are editors, or is it totally its own thing?
So West Branch was started by two professors at Bucknell University, and I'm actually not affiliated with Bucknell University.
Oh,
I'm unusual in the history of West Branch in that it is a Bucknell University institution, and I'm an outside entity, and so I think that's also unusual. So that may be one unusual thing about that has happened because of the pandemic, but it's not a bad thing. It's really not anything to do. There's no crisis for the magazine because of it. But the magazine was started by two Bucknell University professors, and its goal was to actually support emerging writers. And we stuck very closely to that goal since I've certainly been working with the GC and with the magazine. And so I think that's very important, has been an important mission for us. And then so it's part of the Stadler Center for Poetry, which is a Bucknell institution, and it's funded through that and the university. And we do have a very important internship program where every semester 2 or 3 Bucknell University students intern for the magazine. We have 3 editors, 3 genre editors. Those editors are not Bucknell University professors, and but they are really accomplished in their field. So Lindsay Drager, who's the fiction editor, is a very, very accomplished fiction writer. She reads what we call the slush pile, what any magazine would call the slush pile, which is the unsolicited submissions. And she'll pass along the submissions to the reading board, which the interns work for. It's a very, what I really like about the process for selecting work is that everybody's work is read, and I can promise that by typically by the genre editor, but it's either read by me, the genre editor. It's not something where if we don't recognize your name, we are just hitting delete. That's certainly not what happens. And in fact, we very often publish the first, very often we accept work by unpublished writers, and we're the first, publication for that writer. So that's one of the reasons that I very much admire West Branch and continue to work with the magazine, is that we actually really do live by what we preach, which is that we are supporting emerging writers.
That's wonderful. So I know writers tend to get very bogged down with the cover letter, and I think particularly writers who may not have a lot of credentials yet in their bio. So what would you tell a writer, a brand new writer, they have a great story, great poem, they want to send it to you. What should they say in their cover letter? Do you guys read the cover letter? Should they mention that they've never been published before? Does it matter?
So I can't speak for the other editors, and but I feel fairly certain from just knowing Lindsay, I don't think that she actually would spend a lot of time with the cover letter. I think she's really looking for the quality of the work. And I know that I excuse me, I don't spend a lot of time with the cover letters. I'll sometimes check the cover letter mostly if I feel like I recognize a name. So sometimes I recognize a name because somebody has submitted it a few times. And sometimes I recognize a name because they have been published in other literary magazines and I've read their work. And that's often why I check. I'm really trying to place a name. But I don't really ever check to see if a person has, I'm not more likely to read something because somebody has many publications versus somebody, and in fact, I think all that you need to really tell somebody in a cover letter is mention a few, if you have been published before, mention a few publications, and then also just say, you know, if this is fiction or nonfiction or poetry, and also maybe, and I think that's it. I think your cover letter never has to be more than 2 lines. I do see on occasion people sending their bios and cover letters, and that's certainly up to you, but it's not going, as far as West Branch is concerned, it neither helps nor hurts you.
Mhm.
So,
And do you guys solicit work from well-known writers, or does it all come through the slush?
we do solicit work. I don't solicit, I don't really solicit a lot of work though, largely because I want to support emerging writers. And so we have an upcoming issue that's only dedicated to creative nonfiction. And of the 8 pieces that are being published, only 2 were solicitations, and they still had to go through a reading process. So it's not as if it's not as if, and everybody who, even if I solicit work from them, it's not as, I mean, I'm very clear to people that they need to go through a reading process. And so, but yeah, I try to be very careful of not having issues in which the dominant number of pieces, you know, if at most any issue, for me at least, I would say the top amount would be 2, and that 2 would be unusual. So, yeah, of solicitations. Yeah.
Great. And we have a question here from Daniel. Thanks. My impression is you've had a number of guest editors recently. Can you talk about this and how it affects your content?
We have guest editors for West Branch Wired, and we do that we're not doing that this semester so that we can actually highlight the work of our Stadler fellow in poetry, who's also the poetry editor for the magazine. But, and also to highlight Lindsay's, some of the work that Lindsay has selected off the slush pile. The guest editors, we generally invite one guest editor for West Branch Wired, an issue, and generally those editors are established writers. So Tomas Kimarin, who's the most recent guest editor, is a very well-established poet. The work, the people that he's featuring on the website are former students or friends of his, or not former friends, but are friends of his, but they are emerging writers. So we tend to ask the guest editors to give, you know, that this is a great venue for them to support emerging writers that they are know of, that they may have read, or that they have worked with us as teachers. That's only one small, so that's really, the guest editor has no say on content in the print issue. And the guest editor is only selecting, I think at most we have 3 works from the guest editor. So out of the bulk of the work that you see on Wired, that isn't the guest editor. So it's just also been a great way for us to, and I think the best thing about getting the guest editors or asking these guest editors to work with us on West Branch is that we get writers who are afraid to submit on some level because they don't feel like they're ready. And so getting the support from a mentor is a really big deal for them. Garth Greenwell has been a guest editor and did the same thing, where it wasn't his best friends that he was publishing. It was, I don't even think it was students he worked with, but writers that he had been familiar with and emerging writers, like beginning writers that he'd been familiar with their work and wanted to really highlight what they were doing.
That's really cool. So the guest editors are sort of like tentacles that reach into their communities and get writers in that might otherwise not reach the magazine. Yeah. And then the magazine editors actually go through the submissions and decide.
No, we don't. We would rarely ever. This is really, the guest editor really gets to have control, but they're only picking 2 submissions. For every other submission, it's us picking.
I see. Okay. So can you actually take us through the editorial process? So a piece, let's say a short story comes over through the submissions. And actually, let's back up for a minute. You guys, you don't use Submittable. You use Submission Manager.
Yeah. It's just the best for us,
right.
And so if you submit a piece to West Branch magazine, what will happen is that it joins something that we call the queue. Mm-hmm. And all the editors can see the queue, but generally we have 3 genre editors. Right now, I'm both the genre editor for CNF and the acting editor. So I'm occupying 2 roles currently. There's the fiction editor, and then there's the poetry editor. Those genre editors are established writers, and they read the queue. They read everything in the queue. Sylvia Jones was our current poetry editor, and that will change next year. She reads everything, and she's really looking for emerging voices in poetry. And then we read, and the genre editors will select work that might be of interest to us and provides notes. And then I look at the work, and I will then send it to the reading board. And then we will have a discussion among the reading board, which is the managing editor, currently the Stadler Fellow, who's also the poetry editor, and 3 Bucknell interns, and then me. And then we discuss the work. And so, and then we're making decisions. We are making decisions that we look at the quality of the work. We look at the conversation that the work is engaged in. We look at topics that the work is tackling. DEI is really important to us, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're making decisions based on that. And we're looking at sort of worldview. So it's a very complicated decision, and we say no to really good work. This is something that's really important. We actually say no to very high quality work because for all sorts of reasons that have nothing really to do with what we think is the real talent of the writer, but really because we're creating a magazine, and we want that magazine to really be reflective of a wide, we don't have themed issues, except of course we have the CNF only issue, but that's unusual in the history of West Branch. But generally we don't have themed issues. We don't have, we really are trying to sort of showcase and highlight what's going on in the literary community.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. It sounds like the interns that you have are at the end of the reading process, because I think in a lot of magazines, it goes through interns or student readers first, and they do the initial screening, and then it passes up to like the higher level editors. But it sounds like your process is reversed, where the genre editors see it first, and then it becomes like an educational vehicle for interns, and you all discuss it collaboratively.
Yes, that's right. And so usually the genre editor and usually the editor in chief both have read the work. That doesn't mean that we don't have final say. No one actually has final say, or actually I do, but I rarely would ever use it. I think I would. I don't think I've ever used it. I've usually just tried to make a case for the piece. And I certainly know that GC and I have both ended up having to say no to things that we really liked, but we realized didn't really meet the needs of the magazine at that point for that particular issue. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And since you're the creative nonfiction editor, I hear from almost every editor wants to see more creative nonfiction. Would you say that is true for you, or do you feel like you're getting a fair amount equal to the other genres?
I do want to see more creative nonfiction. We don't get anything like, we get far fewer creative nonfiction submissions than we do fiction or poetry. Our fiction has done really well for us. So it's not a matter of, we're out of the, established Center for Poetry. We're like published many poets, both in the beginning of we've launched careers, and we've supported people in the mid-career poets, and something that I'm very mindful of is that often with magazines, there's a type of ageism, and people get very frustrated with literary magazines because they look and they go, oh, because we're supporting emerging writers, you also mean we're only supporting writers of a certain age group. And that is not West Branch as well. That's something that we're very careful about. We do support late career writers, so we are always trying to be really aware of the sort of biases that's out there and try to, work against that. We are, I think our fiction actually, I think I know that last year we had a fiction piece in Best American. We regularly have a fiction story. That's what the irony is. I don't know that any of our poets have ever been in Best American, but we regularly have our fiction gets into Best American or Pushcart or O. Henry. So we definitely don't want to say, don't send us your fiction. We definitely want your fiction. But the CNF is recent. We've only been reading CNF for the last 5 years, I believe. And so we do get fewer, and I think that CNF is, as far as MFA programs are concerned, is a relatively new genre. And so we do get far fewer CNF pieces. I do want to see creative nonfiction. I think the thing that I wish, and I realize we're not necessarily the venue for this, but I really wish that we received, as far as creative nonfiction is concerned, if I had a wish list, I wish that we received more reported pieces, pieces that use some degree of interviews or immersion or some type of reportage. We do get a fair amount of personal essays, and I love the personal essay, but work that I also, some of the best and most interesting work that we receive are works that meld cultural criticism with the personal too. So that's something that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting that there's so much preference for emerging writers, because I also think of West Branch as like a top tier magazine. It's definitely one of the most prestigious, most competitive. But that's also really interesting that you're so invested in emerging writers. So everyone watching this should take heart. This is a place to send your best work. But I'm wondering sort of how you pull that off, how you manage to be sort of this incredibly prestigious magazine with a great reputation, and also have so much new emerging talent. Like, is it just the criteria that you use, that you've somehow managed to find the best work? Or is it, obviously there's so many great talented emerging writers out there, but I think it's rare that lit mags have this level of cachet and also are home for new writers.
I think we've been really, I think that GC certainly did this, and I'm going to give GC Waldrop a lot of credit. He was really good. And so this is the case with Andrew Chitola, who's our managing editor, who's been, I think he's actually the longest editor, the managing editor takes care of production. And so, but he's been affiliated with West Branch, I think close to 15 years now. They have been really fantastic at cultivating editors it's, I see the question about if you're reading blind, how do you ensure or navigate inclusion? It's not as hard as you think. We read, I think Lindsay, and I want to give a lot of credit to Lindsay, the fiction editor in Sprague, she reads closely, and we are getting, I just want to give you some numbers, which is we get probably on a slow week, we're getting maybe, I think we get 50 to 60 submissions in fiction alone a week. So we're getting like something like 7 a day, right? So, and Lindsay is reading every one of them. And Lindsay is a professor at the University of Utah. So this is along with everything else Lindsay's doing, she's reading this. And as far as I can tell, she reads incredibly carefully. She's a very dedicated person. And so, one of the things is that somewhere somebody is reading very carefully. We have so many, we have these interns, we have the editor, we have Andrew, he's the managing editor, we have the genre editors. There's a number of people reading really quite closely. And so that's the way that we ensure inclusion. We are looking for worldview. We are looking for observation. Is somebody, is somebody really capturing a world, right? You can't really fake that. I mean, I guess you could, but I don't know what that means. And if you're that close to this world, then I think your voice deserves to be heard, even if you're not necessarily. So, for example, if you're writing about Sri Lanka, which is where I'm from, and you're not Sri Lankan by nature, but you're so close and invested in the culture and the community that you can write a piece that really convinces me, then that is, I think that's part of representing the world. So I think one of the ways that we do also ensure inclusion is that I do think that the cover letter, I'm thinking about it now, the cover letter matters in the sense when we are trying to make final decisions, I don't know, no, we don't ever really look at the cover letter. I just gotta say, I don't know how many times, I have never had a cover letter come up in an editorial meeting. I think we just are really, we are such close readers. And I think this isn't a world where people are trying to do, for all the talk about literary fraud and all that kind of thing, I don't think there are that many people trying to pull one over on us. And if that's the case, if someone's trying to represent themselves as something that they're not, I don't know, I'm not the one to police that either. So, I don't know what the gain is on that. What I really go and look at the work with believing in the best intentions of the writer and believing in the mission of the magazine and really wanting to see people do well. I know that for me, that I started off getting my work published in literary magazines, and literary magazines are often the first real validation that writers get. I mean, beyond, say, a class. This is the first time that literary magazines is the first way that people see their work out there. So I take that mission really seriously. That it's impossible if you aren't able to get into the New Yorker. It's impossible to get into the Paris Review. Not only do you not need an agent to get into the West Branch, it wouldn't matter at all if you wrote your cover. I don't know that anybody would see it. You know what I'm saying? If you said I'm repped by, it would be meaningless to me. You know what I'm saying? Like it wouldn't hurt you, but I wouldn't go, oh, now I must take this, right? So, and in fact, there are many times I just also wanted to say to you, you should submit not just once, because of the amount of work we're reading. We often say no to very good work. We do begin to see people, and we do begin to really want to see people succeed. So I have a writer that we just took his work. He has submitted for about 5 years, right? You can only submit twice a reading period. So he's been submitting for about 5 years. we began to know him so well. We were using his first name, like we knew him in our notes, and we were like, absolutely, like Lindsay was completely rooting for him. We just took a word. We don't know him, right?
And were you sending personalized rejections, like this is close, but it's not quite right, please try us again? Or did it start as a form letter and then they became more personal? Or were they consistently form rejections, and then one day it just clicked?
So, so here's the thing, here's the truth about a personal, because I used to get personal rejection. I used to think, oh, this is so great. And I would get a form rejection. I would be downcast. And I do remember those days, believe me. And I would think, oh, this is such a, sometimes work that has, sometimes it's, a personal letter is actually really quite complicated. And what has happened in the past for me is that I've sent a personal letter and then somebody has been so thrilled that they have submitted almost immediately not good work. And I've had to say no. And so never, when you get a rejection, never, ever, ever try to guess what the other person, what the editor's thinking on the other end. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not worth that. Just go, that's fine. I'm going to just resubmit again the next, I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to keep rooting for the magazine and I'm going to resubmit. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I will say that I also, the other reason I don't do personal rejections is that I don't believe, so this is where GC and I differed, and I really admire GC, but GC would send notes on work. And I actually think that if you are submitting to a literary magazine and you're a professional about it, and that is 99% of the people submitting, you believe in the work the way that it is. This isn't another workshop. Do you know what I'm saying? This isn't, it's not my job to workshop your piece further. And if you submitted it to me like this is what you want me to read. And I respect that. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I take your work at, this is what you want out in the world. So I'm not going to send back a letter going, you would have gone into the magazine if you changed the point of view. I think that's actually a terrible thing to say to a writer. I treat the work like you're professionals, right? And that you know what you want the world to see of your work. And so that means I end up needing to say to you, oh, you didn't quite fit the issue this time. Good luck. And that seems terrible. You know what I'm saying? So that's just, might as well have gotten a form letter. So the biggest thing is, do not think about the form. I know it's really hard, but I absolutely mean this. It's absolutely meaningless to get, you know what I'm saying? I don't mean that to disappoint you, but don't try to guess the person on the other end.
Right.
Just resubmit.
And it sounds like you try to balance a lot of different things with the work that you're putting out. So if you're trying to balance worldview and the conversations that the particular piece is having, something might get rejected because you've already covered that particular topic in a recent issue and you don't want to duplicate it. So it's not necessarily reflective of the quality of the work.
No,
so again, like writers shouldn't be too discouraged by the rejection because they just don't know. It could be, well, this is very similar to another piece we're already publishing, or this sort of echoes something that we published in the last issue, and we just,
That's right. And it could, and sometimes it happens and it's strange. And I think, for example, we'll suddenly get a lot of, during the pandemic, something that happened is that we start to get a lot of post-apocalyptic stories.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to do a post-apocalyptic theme magazine. So at number 2 post-apocalyptic story that we take, we kind of have to go, okay, we need to really balance this with something that's maybe a little bit more realism, right? And so, and that's, and that doesn't mean that we haven't gotten 20 really good post-apocalyptic stories. It's that we don't even have space to, we don't have space to publish 20 stories, much less 20 post-apocalyptic stories, right? And so, and please don't think, oh, now I can't send her my post-apocalyptic story. I'm just using that as an example, right? But something else that happens is that we publish a ghost story, and then suddenly we see lots of ghost stories in the queue. And so it's like, it's not that I love ghost stories, right? So it's not that I don't want to publish a ghost story every issue, but some editor is going to say to me, you can't publish a ghost story every issue. Okay. So, I hope it doesn't seem too discouraging to hear that. What I'm trying to say is that I remember sitting at, panel discussions with editors, and an editor going, don't send us your cancer stories. I'm thinking, what a horrible thing to say to another human being, right? So I really hope that what you're hearing is not, oh, don't send me something. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying is, don't guess. Try and just send what you think is your best work, and try really hard. And I know this is easy for me to say, but I'm like you, I'm a working writer, and I just want to tell, by the way, I get solicitations. I get people I know going, send me something, and then they go, oh no. And I'm like, what? So, I'm like, wait, what? And so I still know, to this day, I know what it feels, how hard it is to be rejected. I actually feel really sad rejecting people's work, and I reject every day. I'm rejecting people's work. I'm not rejecting people, but I'm rejecting, the work. And so what I want to say is that I can't speak for every editor, but we are really aware, we're working writers who are getting rejected too. And we're really aware of, and I know that I'm personally aware of how hard it is to put your work out there, and also what it feels like to feel as if you're not being seen and not being heard. And this process can be so anonymous and can seem so, but I want to say, the one thing I've learned in my career is that anybody that tells you don't submit cancer stories, or yes, age matters, or we're only interested in this one subject matter. I think that isn't right or fair. We do really try to really take each story at face value.
That's great. Yeah, I think I've sat in on those panels too. No cancer stories.
Yeah.
And no dead grandparent stories. That's
exactly right.
Hearing that one too. And just
I'm like, no dead parent stories, except 3 of the stories in my most recent collection are dead parent stories. So I'm like, I have to say that to myself. So
right.
I think we have to write our concerns. So yeah.
So we have a question here from Margaret. I've submitted 5 stories to West Branch and all were rejected without any note. 3 were published elsewhere. Would resubmission of 2 revisions from 2010, 2011 be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can absolutely submit revised work. In fact, if it was 2010 or 2011, none of the editors who were reading at that time would be reading your work now. So we would not actually know this revision. So yeah, so you could absolutely do that.
Do you have any specific guidelines? So if somebody gets a rejection, let's say within the past year, and they're wondering if they revise it, would you say it should be like a real wholesale revision in order to resubmit it? Or would you want to see a revision, just tinkering, or should they really make substantial changes before sending it again?
I think that if you've submitted a story and we've said no, I think the only time I do send personal notes is if, and I can't say this for every other genre editor, but I believe this would be the case for Lindsay as well. And Sylvia, I know this is the case for Sylvia Jones, the only time that we would that I would suggest sending something that isn't a complete revision is if that's the only time I send a personal note, is when I want to see a revision of something. Something came so close, right? And it really is a matter of, that somebody needs to go through and fix a section or fix something here and there. That's the time that I send a personal note.
Yeah. So it sounds like if it was submitted 10 years ago and you revise it, yes, resubmit it. Yes. But if it was submitted 6 months ago, probably not revise and resubmit.
I mean, I'm not going to say completely no, but I also think do be mindful of, we only take 2 submissions per reading period, and if that's the best use of that, you know what I'm saying. Certainly if you sit on something a year and do a major revision, by all means resend it, right? But if you're just simply revising the same essay over again, kind of guessing, I wouldn't try that. I think that might not be the best use. But then I actually I can't say it wouldn't work. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like I sit there and go, oh, this and this writer. I mean, maybe I would go, okay, I actually really quite like that piece a bit, but let me see the revision and see what they've done. And maybe I can't say that wouldn't work. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, ask yourself, is that the best use of your time?
So you don't have a little list of writers that are so annoying that you will, because I think that's a lot of writers actually fear that. And I know I used to fear that, that if you over submitted to a magazine, the editors are going to keep you on a list of like, this writer is such a pest. And I tell writers, like, really, you have to do something really bad to get on that kind of list from editors, like something really bad. But just submitting your work and being tenacious is not going to get you on some kind of list.
Well, there is no list, and there's no, I mean, I would not ever, I don't, I think a list like that, I don't believe it would be, for me, professional.
Yeah.
But I will say this, the thing that I find has troubled me in the past is we accept something and then we find out that it was taken somewhere else. And because you just heard how rigorously we read, right? There's, the editor, the genre editor, we took this to a reading board and then you had not pulled your piece, okay? And so that really, I'm not saying we have a list that we, I don't have the memory of an elephant. I don't know that I would remember, you know what I'm saying? But I think, so it's not like, oh, I'm going to reject now automatically that person forever and ever. But it's actually I would say that it's very unprofessional to do that. Yeah. And then the other thing that really, really, really would trouble me is if we accept a piece, you say, yay, thank you, and then we find out, and then you write us a few weeks later and go, oh, I have to withdraw the piece, and that has happened, and we realize that it was accepted somewhere else, and decided, and I think I would remember the name of the person that did that. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? There is what I would consider pretty unprofessional behavior, and given the time, if you did that, that means that you were pulling the piece, and this has happened when we were typesetting it. Yeah. Right. And that affects our page count, that affects our, I'm saying, we could have taken another work from somebody who really wanted to be in the magazine and couldn't, right? And so that is the only time I would remember. Yeah. In a negative way. So yeah. And we have a note from Margaret that she did that once accidentally. And the second, you wrote to the second place and said that it had already been accepted. I think, right, I've done that accidentally too. And in the instance that I did it, the editor was very gracious and said, oh, we should have been faster.
don't worry about it. But I think what you're talking about is when the writer has already made a commitment to you. And
Right. That's right.
yeah,
Yes.
like that's
Yes.
great.
Yes.
I'm so
No.
excited.
Yeah.
And then they get accepted in the Paris Review, and then they come back to you and say,
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And then,
yeah.
yeah, and don't do that. I really just not. I mean, if you got into the Paris Review once, you'll get into the Paris Review again.
Yeah.
I promise. You know what I'm saying? And you might say, well, I might get into West Branch again. But I actually, here's a true story. I actually had that happen where I got into a magazine, and then I got into a higher tier that publication, just exactly what you were, was accepted. Maybe like honestly, it happened a week later. And I had actually just thought that they had said no, is what the truth was. It wasn't me trying to be shady. I just thought that they had just forgotten it and didn't care. And then I wrote them and I said, I thought about pulling it from the other magazine because this magazine was more prestigious. And then I thought, no, I'm not going to do that because that is not good karma. Well, it turns out that that other magazine has gone defunct. The one that I got it in has become much more of a big player, and gotten a lot more visibility from that from, you know what I'm saying? And so
you brought them down,
right? So it has happened that I think that one of the people who got into Best American had said that she had been at first sort of like her piece had been accepted somewhere else, and she had almost wanted to pull it, and then she was so glad she didn't because that got into Best American. Do you see what I'm saying? And so and also, by the way, on the revision thing, I do know of one instance where someone submitted a revised piece and the editors had changed and it was taken in the second set of editors.
Oh, that's great.
The Best American.
Wow.
So,
that's great.
So I'm just realizing, the thing is just try to put your best work out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell writers, you gotta dance with the one who brung you, right? If it looks like yes to you, you gotta be ready to say yes to them.
I also just want to say it's really not like there's a hit list or something like that, but it's just, I mean, you don't know. I think what people sometimes forget is that this is a very small world. You just don't. I've actually in other venues. So even if I haven't been able to take work by somebody, I have like maybe if I've been asked to judge a contest, or I have been asked to judge a fellowship or something like that, and I know this person's work, even though I wasn't able to accept that person's piece, maybe they did get 5 rejections. I know that they do work that I admire and been able to push them forward in the fellowship. So that's where you want to be really, really careful about trying to go, oh, this is more prestigious than that. The world is too small for that.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
So,
so we have a question here. Can you talk about the distribution of the magazine? And Daniel is saying he's looked for West Branch and other lit mags in bookstores, but they tend not to carry West Branch.
So the distribution for so bookstores rarely they used to do much better job of carrying literary magazines. I think most major magazines really count on libraries as their majors. So to give you an idea, the distribution for West Branch is pretty high actually, and it's between 2,000, right, and 5,000. The New Yorker is, what is the New Yorker's distribution? I think it's 1.5. I'm not sure, million. So I mean, that's the difference that you're talking about with literary magazines. That said, we do see we do get queries from agents. So we are, for example, you do see agents subscribing to West Branch magazine. And, we do see queries from agents going, who was that writer? We'd love to be able to contact that person. And we also get regularly in Best American and Pushcart. And then also West Branch Wired. A lot of people take a look at West Branch Wired, and that's the other thing I want to say is don't knock online publications. I know that everybody still really kind of privileges print, but my online publications have gotten me more leverage than my print, because more people have seen the online invariably. So as far as distribution goes, no, it's unlikely that you're going to find us in a bookstore that isn't based in Lewisburg, but you will find us in libraries, and you will find us, and the best way I think to get literary magazines is probably to subscribe yourself.
And we had a question somebody emailed me and wanted me to ask you, when do you send acceptance letters? Do you accept pieces on a rolling basis, or do you wait till the submissions period is over and then make your decision?
It's on a rolling basis.
Okay, that makes sense, because it seems like you'd want to jump in a piece before it gets snatched up.
I think the one thing is that sometimes it may take us a long time because we are reading. An acceptance takes us. I've not been able to, because of the amount of work that I've been doing for the magazine. I try to have read, and because I'm reading, I try to send a rejection within 8 weeks. I think Lindsay's a bit faster, and so is Sylvia. But sometimes it can take us up to 3 months because of how intense the reading process is for us to accept a work, and sometimes we do lose work because of that. Yeah.
That's still really fast. 3 months.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good.
Oh yeah. I have things out from 2020 that I'm still waiting.
Yeah, we try not to do that. That would be a mistake on our part. That something really slipped to we try to be very, very careful about that. And I do try really hard not to go longer than 3 months.
Yeah.
Because I know that people are trying to like I know people trying to make decisions, right? And so I would urge you though to submit widely. In fact, most people are saying don't do simultaneous. I actually say submit widely, because I think it is one of the bad things about literary magazines. I think the downside is the amount of time it takes to hear. But I do want you to know that that's because it's not because we're drinking champagne and ignoring the queue. It's because we're trying to find one of the ways that we absolutely do ensure equity and inclusion is that we actually read. And for us to actually read, that takes time, right? Because we're getting work that's 20. If you're doing prose, that's sometimes, I get work that's 20, 30 pages. I read 30 pages.
Wow. Right. So you read the whole piece before deciding on it.
A lot of times, like sometimes you can tell and you know, right? But a lot of times I'm reading the whole thing. And sometimes in some cases, if you're coming close, I've read your work 3 or 4 times. Right?
Wow.
So, yeah.
And is there anything you specifically want to see more of? Maybe more international stories, more stories about the pandemic, more stories about, I don't know, nature? Is there any particular thing, weirder stories, more experimental, more character driven, more voice? Is there something in particular that the magazine is hungry for?
I think that I think so. I don't know whether it's I do want to say that at least with the creative nonfiction, that I'm really interested in supporting writers working in experimental forms in CNF, because there aren't that many venues that support that. So there are a lot of venues actually that support creative nonfiction content, but they tend to do it on a personal essay level or a literary journalism level. So The Atlantic, for example, or Narratively, or The Rumpus. So, I really want not only to support emerging writers, but to be able to provide a space for writers who are doing more kinds of experimental work. That said, experimental work needs to be in conversation with other experimental work. And so I think a lot of times people think, oh, when she says experimental, she just means anything that is sort of off the wall. And as much as I love off the wall, what experimental really is to me is work that's in conversation with breaking the forms or the boundaries. And by the way, what literary journalists, that's a great question. I really love the Georgia Review. I really love, what are some literary magazines that I've really admired? I really loved Conjunctions. Conjunctions does great work. I love, who am I planning to subscribe to? Agni. Agni is fantastic. I have really, I keep renewing my subscription. I try to rotate my subscriptions, keep renewing my subscription to Agni. I think Agni is doing such great work. I really, I'm trying to catch up on online magazines because I want to be able to support online work. Oh, Santa Fe Writers Project. I just want to say that I think they have been doing publishing really smart work. And they have a press and they have a magazine, and both are doing really good work. What are some other magazines? I try also to follow, I do actually spend a reasonable amount of time on Twitter. I don't have that much time in the world, but I do like Twitter for making me aware of magazines that might generally not come under my, may not be something that I realize is doing good work, because I just don't have the time. I'm not like many people are trying to, I don't have the time to keep continuously researching literary magazines. What are some, let me think of other literary magazines that I really like. I've noticed the New England Review has been doing some really interesting work. I've been very interested and fascinated by magazines. I think Plowshares, for example, they have their magazine, and then they also have a one-off, I think it's online. Oh, who was it? It wasn't Plowshares.
Is it the Solos?
I'm not sure. It looks so, I wanted to actually do something. I think they're more because of the decline of magazines that do long form.
Yeah.
There are more magazines kind of offering venues for long form, separate from their print magazine. And I've definitely wanted to, I've thought of trying to get work into. Blackbird is a great magazine. I really liked some of the work they've done. I haven't checked them in the last year or so. So sometimes I'm a little worried because I think, oh gosh, I hope that magazine's still around. So, I actually have to get going. I need to get to a West Branch meeting.
Oh, so, sure. Okay. Do you, we had a quick question. Do you match covers or other art with writing? Just, you can give yes or no. How does the art, do you match the work?
No, we actually, the covers are, Andrew Chitola, who's our magic editor, does an amazing job of keeping up with contemporary artists. And the covers are all work by up and coming, emerging contemporary artists, sometimes some established, but usually it's emerged. I love our covers because our covers are often feature some of the best young, or actually I'm not young, I mean young as in as in career-wise, not young as in age, artists. And actually, our winter issue, which is gone to print and should be being distributed soon, has our first ever digital artwork cover.
Oh, nice.
So it's a really beautiful cover. It's a digital painting. So yeah,
that's great. We'll let you go to your meeting. Thank you so much for taking the time today. This was really fun. And thank you everyone for coming out, and keep going. Sounds like a great mag, and we will look for you. It's westbranch.com.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
westbranch.com, and you guys are on Twitter, and we'll find you, and everybody should submit.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much. Take care. Bye-bye.